on today's agenda, we're just going to finish up P4, or finish up to the best of my ability without the CSS. And then we're just going to go over a close answer to P3. So before I start, does anyone have any questions with P4? Just like conceptually. Okay. So on that note, last week we basically went most of the way there with regards to implementing P4, where we just make a basic version of blackjack. So if I go over the code just real quick, we play in multiple files. So we have our game.js schema, where we basically define a winner, which is a string, and this can be either like a player or the dealer. And then we have the winning hand, which basically represents the cards that won that round specifically. So this is an array of strings. So basically, we store an array of codes in that array. Basically, like ace of sport, 2 of hearts would be 2H, 3 of hearts would be 3H, so on and so forth. And that's how you basically store that in the database. This is fairly straightforward. We have our index.js in routes, which represents our backend. Here we define 2 routes, one to create a score and one to get the total basically aggregation of how many rounds the dealer wins versus how many rounds the player wins. So here we have a counter object, and then we loop through all of the games that we get through what we stored in our database. And then for each one, we check if the winner is the dealer, and then we increment the counters as such. As a reference, our database looks something like the following. If I just log in real quick. So if I go into the database that we dealt with last week, we basically have a bunch of documents. Each one has the winner, the hand, and like the codes that won that. So we query the whole thing, and then we basically find out what the score is. And then we can use that moving forward. So that's what we have over here. When we want to create a document, we have a post route where we basically pull the winner and the hand out of the body. Then we create a document, and we basically return any response. It doesn't really matter. Okay. The front end is where all of the magic happens for the most part. We have a layout.pug where we import jQuery as well as semantic UI. This isn't necessary. You can use raw HTML if you want to. Not that big of a deal, but we're just using this in this implementation. So we have layout.pug, and then in index.pug we have all of our elements. We define 4 modals, 1 which is displayed when the game starts, and then 3 which are displayed when the player either loses, wins, or is tied with the dealer. Okay, of course you would implement this in any way you want. You could have 1 modal that shows for all of them, depending, and then just change the inner content depending on whatever. That would probably be like the cleaner way of doing this, but just in the sake of time, I'm just copy pasting a bunch of stuff. Then we have a div which holds 2 children, one for the dealer cards and the dealer score, right next to each other. So we basically display a bunch of cards, and then right next to it, the total value of those cards. And then right underneath that, we have the same thing, but for the player. And at the moment, we don't have the counters for like the rounds, like how many rounds player A wins versus how many rounds the dealer wins. We don't have anything for that, but we can implement that later. And then we have our 2 buttons as specified in the README, basically 1 to hit, which is in blackjack, you ask for another card, and 1 to stay, which basically means that you're not taking any more cards, and then the dealer starts taking cards. On that note, we have our main.js file, which does all of the logic, has a global variable for all of the information that should be persistent for each session. Right, we have our deck ID, which is what we use to interact with the deck of cards API. And then we have 2 objects, one for the dealer, one for the player. with 3 fields each, one for the current cards that we have. We start off with null, more on that later. A score of 0, and then a soft of 0. Soft basically represents how many soft aces we have. There's an edge case in blackjack where the value can be either 1 or 11 based on what your current score is. And of course, that was explained in last recitation, so you can just watch the recording for that if it's still confusing. We start off with our onload function, where we show our modal with jQuery. This is similar to the example that you saw in the README as well. There's a link that was provided for this. So we show the modal, and then that modal has a button called with an ID of deal. So this is what you see right over here. We add an event listener to that. So as soon as you click it, you make a API request to the deck of cards API to request a new deck. You get the ID from that, and then you set it to your global basically variable to hold this value. And then you sort of start the game, and what this method does is, if I find it, you basically hide the modal that you were shown to begin with, and then you update the displayed cards. And what this method does is basically takes the cards and score elements that we have right over here, so these 4, 2 and 2, and then clears the cards of any children, and then loops through our current cards, and then if it's null, then it displays an image of the back of the card, which we pull from the internet. And if it's not null, then it has to be a code, which means that we insert it into the deck of cards API as part of an image. So here we have a conditional assignment, so a ternary operator, which is the question mark and colon. So if it's null, then this is the image that we decided to use from last week. And then if it's not null, then we have card.png, where card is the code that we store in current. And the reason current starts with 2 nulls is because each player starts with 2 cards that they don't know about. Like, they don't know what they are. So when we obviously want to display that, the way we do that is by assigning null and then showing back the card. And then as we create, as we request more cards from the API, like when it draws it out of the pile, we essentially call this method, which just basically makes a fetch request, requests a specific amount of cards. This is, in our case, only 1 or 2, depending on who's dealing and at what point. Then we use our deck ID, which we stored, to sort of let the API know that we're requesting stuff for this specific instance. So we get the cards from that, and then for each card, we add the card to the person, and then we update the displayed cards. And then our add card method does a bunch of logic to figure out the value of the card, as well as keeping track of the current cards that the player has. So on this line of code, we check if the first element is null, which means that there's at least 1 card that that specific player doesn't know what it is, which means that if we're drawing a card, we're technically replacing that value that we don't know. It's like the same thing as flipping a card over, right? So if it's null, then we delete the first element, which is null, right? And then we just push the our card value from that. We try to parse the score to an integer from the API, and if the card starts with if the code of the card starts with an A, that means that it has a value of either 1 or 11, which means that we set the score to 11 just to be safe, and then we increment the soft variable by 1. If it's king, queen, or jack, then the score is 10, and then you basically add your new score to the overall counter. But if the score is over 21 and you have at least 1 ace that is at a value of 11, that means you basically take that ace and take that value of 11 and turn it into 1. So this is what we do by subtracting 10 from the value, from the score. And then, so we do that, and this should put the score below 21. And then we also, there's a typo in this, but we also decrement soft. So this is what we basically use to keep track of how many soft aces we have. So we draw the card, then for each result, we add the card, which is what the method that I just went over, and then we update the cards based on that, okay? If I run this real quick, but before I do, So we start the game, and then we draw 2 cards for the player, which means that basically you're flipping both cards at once for yourself, and then you're flipping 1 card for the dealer, because that's just how the game works. If we want to request a card, then we call this the same method, right, where we request 1 card. And if we do stay, then it's basically the dealer's turn to draw those cards, and the dealer with this while loop will continuously keep on drawing cards until his score is above or equal to 17. Okay. So on that note,
I have a question.
Yep.
So when you do the await draw current values that dealer is known, would that change, like, would that make it so that the one
above it,
the first would that make it so that the dealer only has 1 card in their hand?
it's the illusion of 1 card, or actually, yes, it is 1 card, but it's the illusion of 2 because the dealer starts off with 2 null cards, which means that it's 2 cards that are like face down,
Yeah.
which means that you don't know what they are. So the way we sort of work around that, and of course there are like a million ways of doing this. To me, this was just like the quickest and most efficient way to, and also technically most secure way, because like if the front end doesn't know what the card is, what that, like the one that's flipped over or face down, then no one knows what it is, which means that we only fetch it when we need to know. But yeah, so at the beginning of the game, you would technically draw 2 cards for both the dealer and the player. But since we already started with 2 nulls, it's just like the way I designed like this specific implementation is we're drawing 1 card, and that is the equivalent of taking one of the face down cards and flipping it over.
Okay.
Okay.
So the score is just always going to be what the visible score is for the
Yeah, absolutely. And like the whole point is that you're not supposed to know what the score of the dealer is until you're done like drawing your cards. Or like you can have an idea of what the score is, but you don't know like the exact one. Okay. All right, so this is what we had last week. We have our modal, we press deal, that basically starts the game, and we make 2 requests to the API. If I look at the network tab, or actually 3 technically. So 1 to actually, so I think like all of this doesn't count. And then we have one called to shuffle, which basically creates a new deck. Then we get their ID from that, and then we create, we draw 2 cards for the player, and then we also draw 1 card for the dealer. Something to think about, like there's a very easy way to make this asynchronous, or like it technically is, right, because it's using await. But at the moment, first it makes a request to this, and then it waits for the response, and only then after it gets the response, it makes another request. In P1, I think, yeah, P1 you had to make calls to the Reddit API asynchronously, which means like at the same time, right? This is not it. You should probably in your implementation do something like P1, where you use promise.all or something to make sure that those requests come in at the same time. So here we have 2 aces, and then you see that something went wrong because we have something went right, because by default these 2 aces would have a score of 22, but because 22 is over 21, and like 21 is the absolute maximum that you can have in this game without losing. One of the aces goes from 11 to 1. So it's 22 minus 10, which is 12. And that's the logic that we basically went over last week. And then here we have a dealer, which has 1 card and like a value of 4. So at the moment, like you know that the dealer score is at least 4. And then like if I'm feeling like gambling, I can take another card, score of 17. Like if I request more cards, the chances of me going over 21 are very high technically, because like there's like the 4 is the limit, and then anything above that you lose. So I'm just going to hit stay, and then the dealer will keep on drawing until they have over 17. And in this case, they have 24. So the dealer will lose. But at the moment, we don't have any logic implemented for any of this. So it's like I can keep on hitting, and then if like stay won't work because our while loop never executes because the score is about like 24 is above 17. So yeah, so let's focus on getting this to work. Okay. So let's see. We have our two buttons. Let's start with hit first. So that's when you request a card. If you go over 21, then you instantly lose. So you basically want to check if your value is over 21 after you draw the new card. So if you do current values dot player dot score is above 21, then you want to sort of like display the modal that the player lost, which we have somewhere over here. We have a modal with the ID of lose modal. So just like we did this, we can do, instead of start, just lose, and that would show the modal that you lost. Okay. If I test this real quick, then yep. So as soon as I go above 21, which I did because I had 23, the modal shows up with the message you lost. Of course, you would have to make this look a lot nicer, but that's basically the basic premise behind that stuff. So you want to show the modal that you lost, and then it also has a button that basically prompts you to try again. So you should have a listener somewhere over here, like alongside deal, to like restart the game, and we'll work on that a bit later. So you show the modal, and then you want to let the server know, like your backend, the one that you implemented, let them know that that like the player lost, which means that the dealer won. So we can have another method for that, where we just, or end round or whatever. It's not that big of a deal. Where we, let's see. All right, so we want to essentially, we want to know who the winner was. So this would be a string which represents either player or dealer. And then we want to know what the winning hand is, and this is what we send to the server, our backend. So this will be asynchronous. We would do a fetch request to our localhost on port 3000 because that's what our backend is listening to at the moment. And then we have a route that's called score, and we want to basically make it post. So in the options field, we would do method post, and then our headers should definitely include content type. Then in our body, we basically want to do JSON.stringify with our object. So we have our winner and hand. So just like the server would expect winner and hand to be in the body, you have it over here as well. So that's what we're doing. And then let's see. After this, we also want to update the counters that we currently don't have for how many times the player or dealer wins. We can have a method for that later as well. So we implemented end round. So if the player loses, then you basically want to call our method, which says that the dealer wins, and then the hand that won would be current values.dealer.current, and current stores our like cards for that specific player or dealer. So the same thing applies to stay, where the dealer draws until they reach above 17 or equal to 17. But instead of player, we hit dealer. If it's above 21, then they automatically lose. You show the win modal, and then you call end round with the player winning, as well as the player's hand. But this rule should technically change to, so instead of being above 21, it should be if it's above the player's score. So technically, or actually, never mind. All right, so in this case, the dealer loses because their score is above 21. If they're below 21, but their score is greater than the players, then they win because their score is actually closer to 21 than yours. Okay. So the way you would do that is have else if current values dot dealer dot score. Let's see. Let's implement the tie first. And then once we have that, else if all right, so we have 3 additional scenarios, and for each one, we have for the tie, we want to display our tie modal, which we have in index.pub right over here. We want to show that. Let's see. Then we want to end round with nothing, right? So you in this instance, you don't want to send anything to the database because no one won. Okay. So the backend just show the time modal, and then the game is restarted. If the dealer wins, then you do the same thing here. And then lose modal since you're the one who's losing. And then, so we have a scenario where the dealer scores above 21, a scenario where the dealer scores equal to yours, a scenario where the dealer scores above yours but below 21, which means that they win. And then any other scenario would just be that the dealer's score is less than yours, but you are still technically below or at 21, which means that you win. Right? So we can just show the modal that you won, and then send our request to the database saying that this is what's going on. All right, so this is the logic on the stay, and then on the hit we have. I feel like it seems like this is everything. So let's test this out. We have deal. I have a score of 20, and like me getting an ace is like next to nothing, right? So I'll just stay, and then you have a modal right over here. All this goes really fast. You can add a delay if you want, not that big of a deal. But dealer score of 18, and then a modal saying you won. It's kind of hard to see, but that's what we have over here. And then if I play it again, at the moment I'm just refreshing, but you should have a button that and right, here's the game. So we'll have that implemented real soon. Player score of 18. Let's say I'm feeling dangerous. I lost because gambled too hard. So we just went through 2 modals. I don't know how often I should play to get a tie, but let's see. Oh well. All right, I'm not gonna waste time, but like if it's a tie, then it should basically say like tie in the modal. Okay. After that happens, we basically want to clear everything that we have except for the counters, which we haven't implemented yet. So let's actually implement the counters. Let's see if I have this implemented on my end. So I don't have that, but let's see. Let's just have a basic div with an ID of tally, for example. So you want a method to fetch the score. And then we would basically send a basic fetch request to our backend. This is a very simple get request. So we have our fetch request, and we do .then, and then res equals to res.json. And then that would return our basically the raw data that the server sends back. So we have that. And then we should also, let's see, window onload fetch tally dot then data, for example. If I open up console and then the window loads, then I have my basically score of the dealer winning 7 times and me winning 3 times. And this is from like last week plus the new request that we made that we just implemented. So on this note, our data is an object with 2 fields. We can just isolate those. We have dealer player equals to data, and then document dot get element by ID tally dot inner HTML equals to, let's say all right, super basic. So if I refresh this, then nothing happens because this is my element is null, and that is because I did not save my index.pub file. So if I do that and then refresh the page, then you'll see that I have my basically score displayed over here. Okay. Again, your responsibility is to make this look nice. But on that note, so we have our counter. We have our method that updates the tally, that fetches the tally. And then we also want to clear the game. So let's create a method for that. Let's see. So when we clear the game, we want to update the tally, but we also want to clear our stuff. So let's see. I'll just copy this real quick. So we clear the values from our global variable. That'll be current values dot deck ID equals to null. All right, so we have these values being set to the default, and with that, at the moment we don't call our clear game method anywhere, but we would, as a principle, want to call it whenever we end a round. So we would do something like this, right? That would essentially refetch our tally, right? Update the inner HTML of our element and wipe all the values, and then we can start from scratch. However, with that in mind, we also don't have this function being called when we have a tie. So in order to deal with this, let's do this thing where we just pass, either no values or null values, and add a check for that in our method over here. So you want to clear the game if it's a tie. However, if the winner is undefined, then you don't want to send a request. So you can just break out of the method by returning. And what this would do is you would clear the game and then go from there. So let's see how this ends up working. All right, so I lose, and then I send my methods to update the score. And then if I press try again, nothing will happen because we don't have that implemented just yet. But it should clear the game, but nothing updates here because we don't actually call the update card our update displayed cards method. So we could do that, but we can also code our buttons for deal 2, 3, and 4, which are the buttons that belong to these modals over here, to actually start a new game. So we can do that. First things first, I want to move this to an external method. Let's see. And then this would have to be async since we're pasting some async stuff over here. So we have initialize, and then I just want to replace that with this, and then we can just copy this for our multiple deal buttons. Again, like if you have one modal that dynamically changes the content based on whether the user wins, loses, or is tied, then you only have to do this once. But we're just keeping this very simple here, just a bunch of copies, and then moving on from there. So whenever we click on the button, we initialize a game, and that involves getting a new deck ID, setting to the current values, and then calling start game, and then drawing the cards. So let's see where this takes us. Well, this is fairly straightforward, but also let's hide the modals. Let's see if I have any code. All right. So let's hide all the modals that could possibly be displayed here. So we have our win modal, and then lose modal, and then tie modal. So if I just paste this real quick, then what we should get is that the modals are cleared as well. So if I just go back to this, reload, we get our welcome to blackjack modal. I'm at 18, so I don't want to risk playing the card, but the dealer gets 20, so I still lose. You get the message. If I press try again, then I get a fresh set of cards, and I can keep on playing this. So this one I won. So every time the round ends, we essentially get so our updated score, as well as our new round whenever we're done. So let me just test this real quick. It's always fun to gamble, I guess. But yeah, so when we lose, when we win, and when we tie, there's a modal. Pressing the try again button on those modals will trigger a new round, and we wipe all of the previous information of that specific round. But we do send requests to our API or to our backend, and you see that if I look at the payload for this, well, at the moment we have null and 5D. So let's figure this out. Okay, so essentially we have this uncovered edge case where if we go above 21, let's say if I hit this, I'll go above 21, and the dealer's hand is a 10 and not a 10, or like an uncovered card, then essentially we're sending the current hand of the dealer, which makes sense in our code. However, we send a null, which isn't realistically the case because the dealer is always supposed to reveal their card whenever they essentially, like whenever the player loses. So what we can do with this is actually account for this edge case in our hit button. So here we have our lose modal, right? But before we instantly kick the player out of the game and tell them that the player lost, like the player still lost, but we should definitely get that missing information from what that player or what the dealer's first card is. So we can do a quick check. If current values dot dealer dot current, and then if the first card is Jesus Christ, if the first card equals to null, then you actually want to await draw and then give the dealer essentially an extra card. So if we do this, what we can see here is that if I go above 21, then nothing works. Hold on. Current is not defined. That is because it should be current values dot dealer dot current. I don't know why. Let's see. And I guess this is part of the debugging process where you get your error, you get the line of code in which it's located. So our stuff is located at current is not defined main.js 142, which is what we had right over here. So this should be fixed now. So let's give this a shot. All right. I want to go above 21 intentionally. You lost, and then you see over here it actually reveals the card that the dealer has. And then if we go in the network tab and look at what we're sending to the server, we're seeing that we're sending the 8 of diamonds, which is 8D, and then the 3 of diamonds, which is 3D. And then the winner is the dealer, and then rinse and repeat. That's pretty much everything. So let's just review this code one second really quickly. So we have our initialize, which is what basically kicks off the game. We also clear the values on the end of every round. You could also technically call this whenever you initialize, right? Because it's pretty much the same thing. We just have it here. It's up to you, again. But let's see. So we kick off the game, and then we draw 1 card for the dealer and 2 cards for the players, for the player, right? That is, what you can do. And then after that, the player is given the opportunity to either hit or draw. If they want to hit, then they are given an additional card. If the value after that draw is over 21, then you have the dealer reveal their card, and then tell the player that they lost the game, and then you also send that to the server for storage, and then we can take a look at that of how that looks like in a bit. And then if they want to stay, that means they don't want to draw any more cards. So while the dealer while his score is below below 17, we basically give that dealer a new card, and then if they go above 21, then the dealer loses, and we set the player as the winner. Otherwise, if it's a tie, then we basically cover that route as well. And then just like I mentioned before, all these edge cases are covered. So make sure that your comments are accurate. That's pretty much it. So yeah, just for future reference, this will most likely be the last recitation that we're having this semester, simply because P4 is, that's all you have left, right? I'll be having office hours tomorrow and the day after, but once you finish P4, there will be no more quizzes. So the quizzes that you did already, those are the last ones. And then all you have to worry about for this class is the final project and the actual final itself. So recitations, probably won't help with those. So if you have any questions, just email me. I'll do my best to help with whatever. And yeah, so it's been a fun ride. Thank you all for showing up to recitations and watching the recordings as well. I hope these were useful. And yeah, it's been a pleasure. So thank you to everyone for being part of this experience. But